Merry Christmas, everybody. Ian Bremmer here. And before we all head off with friends and family for the holidays, some thoughts on where the United States and the world happens to be at this point in time. It's been a very tough week in the United States, both because in New York, and of course the glad tidings of New York very quickly come to a theater near you, are increasingly concerns about breakthrough COVID cases, the potential for hospitals to get overwhelmed, even if Omicron turns out to be significantly milder than previous variants. If you have 10x the number of cases and 1/3 the hospitalizations, you're still going to overwhelm hospitals. And what happens in New York does not stay in New York. It's not like Vegas here. It goes to the rest of the world and it goes across the country. This, of course, is a real problem for the Biden administration that entered the presidency saying that we were all going to be independent from COVID in July 4th. That is not the case. We're still wearing masks. We still need boosters. And we're still dealing with all of this, and we will be, and that is making life much more difficult for Biden, as is the fact that Senator Joe Manchin individually decided to put an end to the administration's effort to build back better. Joe Manchin putting some coal in Joe Biden's stocking for Christmas, and that means that the signature piece of legislation that Biden would have hoped for his entire presidency is not happening. Maybe they'll find one or two pieces of it that they can get done next year, but it is a tiny sliver of what they were hoping for, and that's why you see the White House and members of the Democratic Party leadership so angry and hostile at Manchin right now. It's a big present for the Republicans. So in terms of the domestic politics of the presidency, the first year has been really challenging. Some of that is Biden's fault. I mean, the delinking of infrastructure bill from Build Back Better did allow them to get that $1.3 trillion passed, and that is significant. It is a win. It's something that the Trump administration and many administrations were unable to do, and Lord knows the Americans need to invest in infrastructure. They even got a fair number of Republicans to support the bill, showing you that even in this level of partisanship, obviously good ideas reflect common sense and can pick up support. But beyond that, there's not much you can focus on from a legislative perspective that they're going to be able to get done, that they have been able to get done. And that's going to lead to very low approval ratings, together with the fact that you didn't get vaccines and boosters in particular rolled out across the population as quickly as you might have. The U.S. still is really nowhere on testing, and you've seen all those lines in the tri-state area, and you'll see them in other places as well. So, I mean, Biden on the merits has been okay in responding to COVID, but of course, the buck stops with the president, and whatever the performance is, that's the way you're going to look at his success. And right now, almost a year in, with Americans facing an enormous wave from Omicron, people not going to be very happy with him for that. On the foreign policy side, I would argue that there have been significant successes, and there's also been quite a few failures. Some of those failures are self-imposed. Some of those failures are constraints of massive division inside the United States. On successes, the transatlantic relationship, even with France, but across the board, is considerably stronger and more functional than it was under the Trump administration. There have been some wins, for example, on trade with the removal of the steel and aluminum tariffs, the Section 232, with the end of the fights between Boeing and Airbus facilitated by the administration, with the alternative minimum tax that was started with the U.S. and the EU, but now is agreed upon by all of the OECD. Those are all significant. They're not massive, monumental, but they're significant economic wins that help to build trust in the transatlantic relationship. The coordination between the United States and the Europeans on Ukraine and Russia in the run-up to the threats from Moscow also have facilitated more functionality with the most important allies. And then, of course, on climate, generally speaking, a much more functional relationship than we had under the Trump administration. Furthermore, in Asia, the Quad has been a success. It started under Trump, and it's expanding under the Biden administration. The U.S. relations with the Indians, with the Australians, with the Japanese, all only trending better, in large part because the Chinese have done more to antagonize these countries than the Americans have done to draw them in. But the relationship is welcome on both sides, and it is working. And you're also seeing coordinated diplomacy that has facilitated things like support for more vaccines being donated, the U.S. now leading the world, more vaccines donated than the rest of the world combined. You see more intelligence coordination, more security coordination. Where the U.S. is absent is on trade policy, and that's because the Democratic Party and the broader American public increasingly is strongly opposed to multilateral agreements, to lowering tariffs, and to free trade agreements. So there isn't a trade policy from the Biden team right now. That is a problem for them. In Asia, it's one they increasingly admit. We've talked a lot about the failures in leaving Afghanistan, in particular the lack of coordination with the allies. There is still significant pain in many of the relationships as a consequence of that. The Iran deal, Biden desperately wants to get back in. It's broken. Can't get back in. That's a real problem. Yes, a legacy of Trump having pulled out, but Biden can't fix it. And on China, I would say the U.S. policy has been okay-ish. They are trying to avoid crisis. They are trying to find some areas to cooperate where it's clearly in the U.S. national interest. We've seen that on the Strategic Petroleum Reserve release. We've seen a little bit of that at the margins on climate. We may see a little bit of that on tariffs. But across the board, the relationship is largely problematic. It's mistrustful. It's heading towards more confrontation, not less. That was true under Trump. That has continued to be true under Biden. So, I mean, how do you rate a presidency like that when the country is more divided than any of the other major democracies, wealthy democracies in the world? The politics are more dysfunctional. I mean, any president would have a really hard time with that. This presidency has had a few own goals. Most of their challenges have been because of those constraints domestically, and a few successes at the margins too. So it's been a tough year. It has also been a tough year in the middle of a crisis that continues to persist. And a crisis that continues to persist in part because there isn't global leadership in responding to the pandemic. So that's your message for this Christmas 2021. I hope everyone is healthy and happy, and as much as we can be on both of those fronts, and get some time off and enjoy friends and family, and I'll see you in the new year.